April 16th, 2014. Guys, talking about timing. The video before this, people had been talking about, we mentioned that there was 100 quakes in Idaho Monday. And so in the video, I looked back and saw the last quake that we had, and it was the Boar Peak Mountain quake. And it was just this morning, guys. You see where the ground was ripped open for 20 miles and the 350 feet in some places. But now, a Russian civil defense company, they use satellite technology and different ground instruments and from around the world. But it's called IRUPTION. They advise the World Organization of Volcanic Observatories that a red alert status level for the Boar Peak Mountain in Idaho may be warranted in the coming weeks due to increased volcanic seismic activity detected by both ground and satellite observations. This is the second such warning issued by IRUPTION this year and follows their 24th January prediction that an earthquake and ensuing tsunami are expected to strike off the southwestern coast of Sakhalin Island to the north of the epicenter of the August 2nd quake they had back in 2006. That was a 6.2. They predicted that for this year because of the pressure and their satellite readings, so we'll keep an eye on that. It says important to note about IRUPTION predictions is that unlike their western counterparts, who we're not getting any warning from, they're too busy putting money into the Bureau of Land Management. It says Russian scientists suggest 4 new techniques for long-range predictions of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, which are universal and can be applied to all of the regions of the Earth. This type of forecasting has no psychic aspects to it at all, and it's called phase trajectory technique. It concerns a simultaneous analysis of periodic and quasi-periodic space rhythms, which involve many factors that have a great effect on these terrible formations, including but not limited to lunar tides and solar cycles. The red alert status for Boar Peak Mountain, the largest in Idaho, means that an eruption is forecast to be imminent with significant emission of ash into the atmosphere likely. Now, guys, they're talking about space rhythms. It's much simpler than that, although that may be a part of the effect of it. What it is, guys, is, and you've seen it, is solar flares, coronal mass ejections. So they're at least looking in the right direction. But it says first arousing IRUPTION concerns about Boar Peak Mountain. This report continues. Was the 4.8 mag earthquake which struck the Yellowstone caldera supervolcano on the 30th of March. That was the largest tremor to hit this region in nearly 30 years and was preceded by a series of small earthquakes in central Idaho and accompanied by a near simultaneous 3.1 mag earthquake occurring near Boar Peak Mountain on the same day, prompting the IRUPTION warning about Boar Peak Mountain to the World Volcano Agency. Said this report says there was yesterday's April the 12th 4.9 magnitude earthquake in central Idaho near the city of Challis, which on October 28, 1983 suffered the 6.9. That was in the video earlier. Now, it goes on to say that it's critical to note about Boar Peak Mountain in central Idaho that says this report says that it is part of what is called the Intermountain Seismic Belt, or the ISB, which extends from Southern California and connects many of the western United States regions, most particularly the Yellowstone caldera, and it is overdue for a catastrophic volcanic eruption event. As to how violent this region is, IRUPTION in their report further notes that the 1983 Boar Peak Mountain earthquake ranks as one of the most powerful earthquakes in the 20th century in the lower 48 U.S. states. Goes on to talk about the 20-mile-long scarp that was raised at points as much as 14 feet and is still visible today. I'll show you a couple more images of that, guys. But it says, at the very edge of the Yellowstone caldera, including its 2 most seismically active states, Nevada and Idaho, says the report is perplexing. It says there are fracking operations in the ISB volcanic zone that are being allowed to continue in spite of their own experts' findings and recommendations. It says, especially from this past week's report from the Midwestern region, which in part states, Ohio geologists have found a probable connection between fracking and a sudden burst of mild earthquakes last month in a region that had never experienced a trembler until recently. Now, guys, one thing about that's why I'd asked this question the other day. If you look at those Idaho quakes, how many are at the depth of 5 kilometers, or that's what they're listed at? Same thing with the Oklahoma fracking quakes. But reported there's not that much fracking in this area. But that does usually is a key indicator when you see quake after quake at 5K depth. But we'll watch that. Now, it says that the state's announcement of some of the nation's strictest limits on fracking, that was in the report earlier this week, guys, on mainstream, says marked the strongest link to date between nerve-rattling shakes and hydraulic fracturing, the process of firing water, sand, and chemicals deep into the earth to inject oil and natural gas out of ancient rock. Last month, Ohio indefinitely shut down Hillcorp's energy fracking operation near the Pennsylvania border after 5 earthquakes, including one magnitude 3 that awoke many Ohioans from their sleep. And again, they mentioned the space rhythms, guys, and I'm not saying there's nothing to it at all. I'm just saying that you can much more accurately get right down to where the rubber meets the road, if you know what I mean, by watching the sun. It says according to space rhythms, lunar tides, and solar cycle analysis, prompting this red alert volcanic warning from Boar Peak Mountain, this AmeriCom report concludes that are partially based upon the coming blood moon tetrad cycle that began on the 15th and concludes the 28th of September 2015. Now, I also agreed that the tides do affect the quakes because when you have the full moon pulling the ocean all the way across the Atlantic or Pacific, imagine how much weight is put on the plates in the ocean, and most of those are thrust under the dry land plates, the continental plates. So I definitely agree with that. And guys, what I was talking about at that 5K depth, let's look at the 83 bore stats on this thing. Again, October 28th, 83, magnitude 7.3. That's how it initially was reported and finally listed 6.9. But notice here, 16K, or 9.9 miles. Again, look at a lot of the earthquakes on the new earthquake charts, and a lot of this Chalice quake depth is listed at 5K. But again, it talks this page, and you can pause this, will give you some of the information that was in the video earlier. And again, if you remember, it said that thousands, let me pull this up, guys, thousands of in Thousand Springs Valley, a series of artesian fountains and sand blows erupted immediately after the main shock of the 83 Boar Peak earthquake. Groundwater gushed from these fountains, forming small craters and depositing aprons of lightly colored sandy sediment around each crater. Look at, I'll show you some of these images. This is on Wikipedia. You can see it, guys. But that water got so hot under there, and when it cracked, it released it. And the water pressure itself may have had a lot to do with the quake, a geothermal explosion, much like the one that we saw that formed Crater Lake. Let's look at a couple of these other images. Again, guys, you saw this earlier, but with this information that's on RSOE, I thought I would go over it one more time. This is the called the Fault Scarp Boar Peak. Check that out. You can see the cars there. But it ran about 21 miles, some places as wide as 350 feet. Now, at that time, there was not the pressure being reported that we see at Yellowstone. And they're talking about a connection between these two areas, guys. You understand what I'm saying? And you've seen some videos recently where they're saying that that caldera is filling with lava again. Guys, I'm also keeping an eye on the sun. You saw the report earlier today where they've issued this proximity alert of the growing sunspot in the center. And you can see this activity continues, small burst after small burst. What you're seeing here are the actual flares, not coronal mass ejections so much on this camera because of the way it's filtered. But that's important now, but we're going to have to watch both. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.